Yin and Yang are the core principles of learning Chinese traditional culture and wellness wisdom. Whether or not you've previously been exposed to Chinese medicine or wellness knowledge, you can start by setting aside the complex concepts and focus on the basics of Yin and Yang. We need to simplify complex issues, and at first we won't discuss the 5 elements or the 5 Zhang organs. Instead, we can begin by understanding through the lens of Yin and Yang. In the field of Chinese medicine and wellness, the core focus of Yin and Yang actually revolves around 2 main concepts, qi and blood, and cold and heat. Most of the symptoms we encounter can be explained through the imbalance of qi and blood, and the imbalance of cold and heat. For example, summer has arrived, and the entire climate of nature is in a yang state. Whether in the south or north, the temperature is gradually rising. The heat and energy brought by the sun continue to increase, and the internal temperature of the earth is also very high. This is something anyone familiar with geography would know. During the summer, heat energy is released from the earth's interior, and our bodies follow a similar pattern. Under normal circumstances, the internal environment of the human body will synchronize with the natural environment. For example, in summer, the heat on the body's surface increases significantly, while our internal organs remain relatively cooler. This results in an external heat, internal cold state. The heat stays on the surface, while the interior remains cold. A corresponding natural phenomenon would be, while the outdoor weather is hot, the basement is cool, and well water is often ice cold. I'm from Shaanxi, a place rich in coal, and many mines are there. During the summer, when workers go down into the mines to extract coal, they need to wear thick cotton coats because the temperature underground is extremely low, and the cold air is very heavy. So actually, summer is more prone to cold symptoms. This is why the Huangdi Neijing, Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic, states, spring and summer nourish yang. During the spring and summer, the consumption of yang energy is more intense than in autumn and winter. So special attention should be paid to replenishing the body's internal yang energy. During the summer, the internal organs and digestive system of the human body are more prone to a state of insufficient yang energy. Once cold or raw foods are consumed, it can easily lead to digestive discomfort, the invasion of cold, and the onset of various gastrointestinal diseases. These cold energies, however, are more likely to be expelled from the body during this time because it is when yang energy is at its peak throughout the year. The body is very intelligent and does not want these cold and damp energies to remain inside. As long as there is enough energy and qi and blood to drive the process, the body will activate various mechanisms to expel the cold. Common signs of cold expulsion include diarrhea, coughing, fever, sneezing, runny nose, and even skin rashes. These are all natural expressions of the body working to expel cold. One of the causes of the body catching cold is actually self-induced, especially during the summer. The widespread use of air conditioning and the consumption of cold food makes people more susceptible to cold than in other seasons, with colder symptoms being even more severe in southern regions compared to the north. Common conditions in the summer, such as heat-induced cold or stomach flu, actually gastroenteritis, are closely related to the invasion of cold into the digestive system. The term heat-induced cold is based on classifying colds into wind heat and wind cold categories. When a patient presents with a yellow thick tongue coating, yellow sputum, or yellow nasal discharge, it is mistakenly believed to be caused by heat. In fact, this is a cognitive misunderstanding. Remember a simple rule of thumb. If the body exhibits symptoms like sneezing, runny nose, or coughing, it is generally due to cold invasion. You don't need to focus too much on whether the phlegm or nasal discharge is white or yellow, nor do you need to delve into the transition mechanism between yellow and white phlegm. While these changes have physiological explanations, it's more important to view them from the perspective of yin and yang, cold and heat, when diagnosing. In fact, in the summer, only heat stroke is truly a heat condition. For example, prolonged exposure to stuffy, hot environments without proper hydration can lead to heat stroke. Most other so-called heat symptoms, including coughing, runny nose, and diarrhea, are actually reactions of the body attempting to expel cold. We need to learn to always use the yin-yang, cold-heat perspective to identify the nature of diseases, whether it is a viral cold, bacterial infection, or gastrointestinal discomfort and colds caused by air conditioning or eating cold food. The root cause is cold evil. This is because the nature of viruses and bacteria is inherently cold. They fear heat and can be classified as cold evil. Once you fundamentally understand that this is cold, the response should be using heat to expel cold, warming and tonifying yang energy, raising body temperature, and improving circulation. As long as the general approach is correct, the treatment will not go wrong. But if the approach is incorrect, the treatment may actually worsen the condition and result in inefficiency. When our bodies are exposed to cold or when bacteria and viruses enter our system, especially the digestive system, the body immediately activates its self-defense and self-healing mechanisms. It recognizes that these foreign invaders are harmful to our health. So, when energy levels are sufficient and the body is capable of fighting back, it will exhibit symptoms like fever, coughing, runny nose, sneezing, and even diarrhea. These reactions are the body's active efforts to expel cold, dampness, bacteria, and viruses. I believe many of you have experienced this. In the early stages of a cold, it may simply be due to exposure to cold air or air conditioning, leading to clear nasal discharge and clear phlegm. But as the illness progresses, the mucus and phlegm turn yellow. This indicates that symptoms change as the body's condition evolves. During this process, new symptoms may also appear, such as a sore throat or even tonsillitis. What many people may not notice is that this phase is often accompanied by constipation or difficulty with bowel movements. So, why does clear nasal discharge and clear phlegm turn into yellow mucus and yellow phlegm? This is actually related to the changes in the body's internal heat. When the cold energy is being expelled from areas like the lungs, if the body's yang energy is insufficient or the heat is inadequate, it cannot fully transform the damp and turbid energy, which is why the discharge remains clear. In other words, clear nasal discharge and clear phlegm represent cold, indicating that the body does not yet have enough yang energy to transform the cold damp. As the body's energy gradually increases, and there is enough heat to combat the external pathogens, these secretions will begin to turn yellow. This actually reflects a stage of transition in the process of the body battling the pathogen. However, when we begin drinking jianghan cha or eating warming foods, or when the intestines are cold and prevent heat from descending into the large intestine to be expelled through bowel movements, this heat will start to accumulate inside the body. At this point, the internal heat is actually a manifestation of yang energy. As the yang energy gradually becomes sufficient, phlegm will change from clear to yellow, and nasal discharge will shift from clear to yellow as well. This stage usually indicates that the illness is reaching its final phase. Recovery is near. So we can understand it this way. Clear phlegm and clear nasal discharge indicate a deficiency of yang energy in the body, meaning the constitution is relatively cold and yin dominant. Yellow phlegm and yellow nasal discharge indicate that yang energy is gradually becoming sufficient. Although phlegm itself is still a damp cold substance, the fact that yellow phlegm can be expelled shows that there is now enough internal heat to drive this disease-clearing process. We can observe whether a person is expelling yellow or clear phlegm nasal mucus to judge whether their internal yang energy, which includes both qi blood vitality and body heat, is adequate. But regardless of the state, the essence of the entire disease-expelling process is the body eliminating invading wind cold, what traditional Chinese medicine refers to as cold evil. These cold evils may come from the environment or from bacteria and viruses, among other sources. Sometimes people ask, "Oh no, my child has a fever and a cough, what should I do?" In such cases, you must develop the habit of asking a few key questions first. These questions are: 1. Are the hands and feet warm? 2. Is it yellow phlegm, yellow mucus, or clear phlegm, clear mucus? 3. Is the bowel movement regular and smooth? 4. Is their overall energy and spirit good? 5. Have they been sweating? These 5 are must-ask questions. So why ask these specific things? Let me explain. First, asking whether the hands and feet are warm is a very important indicator for assessing whether the child or patient has sufficient qi and blood energy. If the hands and feet are cold, it indicates a deficiency in internal qi and blood energy. That's because the temperature of the extremities reflects the condition of the core organs and their energy circulation. The temperature of the hands is connected to the heart. If the hands are colder, it often means a slower heartbeat or weakened heart function, meaning the blood isn't being pumped effectively and its temperature is lower. The temperature of the feet is connected to the small intestine. Heat generated by the heart travels to the small intestine, and if the small intestine receives enough of this warmth, then the feet will naturally feel warm. So if you often have cold feet, it suggests poor intestinal function. The intestines only work effectively, digesting, breaking down, and absorbing nutrients when they are sufficiently warm. Sometimes people ask, "Oh no, my child has a fever and a cough. What should I do?" In such cases, you must develop the habit of asking a few key questions first. These questions are: 1. Are the hands and feet warm? 2. Is it yellow phlegm, yellow mucus, or clear phlegm, clear mucus? 3. Is the bowel movement regular and smooth? 4. Is their overall energy and spirit good? 5. Have they been sweating? These 5 are must-ask questions. So why ask these specific things? Let me explain. First, asking whether the hands and feet are warm is a very important indicator for assessing whether the child or patient has sufficient qi and blood energy. If the hands and feet are cold, it indicates a deficiency in internal qi and blood energy. That's because the temperature of the extremities reflects the condition of the core organs and their energy circulation. The temperature of the hands is connected to the heart. If the hands are colder, it often means a slower heartbeat or weakened heart function, meaning the blood isn't being pumped effectively and its temperature is lower. The temperature of the feet is connected to the small intestine. Heat generated by the heart travels to the small intestine, and if the small intestine receives enough of this warmth, then the feet will naturally feel warm. So if you often have cold feet, it suggests poor intestinal function. The intestines only work effectively, digesting, breaking down, and absorbing nutrients when they are sufficiently warm. When we use yin-yang thinking to analyze an illness, the first step is to determine whether it's a cold condition or a heat condition. Next, we assess whether the body's energy is sufficient or deficient. If the body's energy is sufficient, even when a child has a fever and cough, yet they still have good energy, are running around and playing as usual, eating well, and their hands and feet are warm, then you can rest assured. This means the child has enough yang energy to handle the illness on their own. However, if a child becomes weak and clingy as soon as they catch a cold or develop a fever, if they are low in energy, sleep poorly, refuse to eat, and have cold hands and feet, then this indicates energy deficiency. When a child has enough internal energy and shows symptoms of a cold, in many cases you don't need to intervene at all. The body will resolve it naturally. Let the child drink when they're thirsty, eat when they're hungry, but it's important to avoid cold or raw foods, avoid fruits, avoid drafts or air conditioning, and focus on keeping the child warm and well-rested. Give them water only when they're actually thirsty. If the body doesn't signal thirst, forcing water can actually become a burden, because the body then has to expend energy to process and expel the excess fluids. We should also check whether the child is sweating and whether their bowel movements are normal. Why? Because as previously mentioned, the body has 3 main ways to eliminate waste and toxins: sweating, vomiting, and defecation. Sweating and bowel movements are 2 of the most important ways the body expels illness during sickness. If a person is sweating, it means the pores are open and the surface of the body is able to release heat, showing there's no external cold blocking the surface. Some people don't sweat easily, or they don't sweat at all during a fever. This may be due to long-term exposure to cold, causing the pores to remain constricted. For example, I had a friend who went deep diving and experienced cold exposure on the body's surface. His pores closed up, preventing sweat from being released, and he eventually broke out in hives, which was a form of the body trying to eliminate the blocked waste. There are also people who sweat normally, but when they catch a cold or fever, they suddenly stop sweating. In this case, the body is intentionally holding back sweat in order to retain internal heat, helping to quickly raise body temperature and drive out cold and pathogens. This kind of not sweating is a strategic move by the body, and there's no need to worry. Once the body reaches a certain temperature and determines it's time to expel the virus, bacteria, or dampness, it will naturally open the pores and release the sweat. There's no need to take fever-reducing medicine in advance, because antipyretics, fever reducers, are essentially just sweat-inducing agents. Their goal is to make the body sweat. Once sweat is released, the fever goes down. Modern medicine has discovered that sweating brings down a fever, so it created medications to trigger sweating. But in reality, this is like being in the middle of a decisive battle. You've nearly surrounded the enemy, and just as you're about to wipe them out, the commander suddenly orders a retreat. The result? The enemy isn't defeated. They just go into hiding inside the body. In this way, the viruses or cold pathogens remain dormant within. That's why many children lose their appetite, suffer from digestive issues, or develop constipation, diarrhea, rhinitis, or pharyngitis after the fever has been suppressed. These are consequences of not supporting the body's natural process of expelling illness during fever or cold. When we cut the fever short prematurely, the wind, cold, dampness, or pathogens are trapped inside. As a result, the body is forced to eliminate these retained pathogens over time through chronic symptoms like long-term diarrhea, persistent runny nose, sneezing, ongoing phlegmy cough. These chronic conditions are not illnesses in themselves, but rather the body's continuous effort to clear out cold and dampness. However, if we mistake these symptoms for diseases and continually suppress them with medications, we eventually reach a point where no condition can be truly resolved. If you examine most medications, their purpose is to target symptoms, not root causes. And if we only suppress symptoms, the underlying waste accumulates, making it impossible to heal the real issue. This is why, up to now, modern medicine has not cured any chronic illness. There is no miracle drug that completely heals any disease. Back to diagnosis. If a child has constipation along with a fever, it is often accompanied by sore throat, tonsillitis, and yellow phlegm. This is sometimes diagnosed as a wind heat cold in traditional Chinese medicine. But in essence, it's not true internal heat. It's what we call false fire. The tongue coating is yellow, indicating internal accumulation. Why does this happen? Because the intestines are cold and blocked, and heat builds up internally, unable to exit via bowel movements. This trapped heat then rises, showing up as inflammation or discharge in the upper body. So even in cases of so-called heat, the underlying cause is still cold. As I've already mentioned, once symptoms like fever, cough, and sore throat appear, we should ask the right diagnostic questions, understand the root principles behind these signs, and then determine how to respond appropriately. When you assess someone's physical condition through the lens of cold-heat, and whether their energy is sufficient or deficient, if you find that their energy is abundant, you can offer some simple advice, such as eating a light diet. Why light? Because greasy foods consume a large amount of the stomach and spleen's vital energy. The lighter the food, such as porridge or vegetables, the more beneficial it is for the body. Avoid fruits, minimize fried foods, and there's really no need for things like chicken soup or fish broth. The plainer the food, the easier it is to convert into vital energy and blood. Jianghan cha is a drink that directly replenishes energy and blood. However, when the body already has sufficient energy, the amount of ginger tea doesn't need to be large, especially for children. They can maintain a normal amount. If the child is unable to sweat and the parents are worried, you can let them drink a bit more. As long as they sweat, the fever will subside. This also helps reassure the parents. In my view, fever is highly beneficial to the body. It's a way the body repairs itself. Sometimes there's no need to rush to reduce a fever. Let it run its course. Because during a fever, blocked meridians may be opened, and minor issues in the body may be resolved under the high temperature. When the body is in a high heat state, cell activity is at its peak, allowing the body to repair issues that are otherwise difficult to fix. So sometimes, after a high fever that lasts several days, previous problems may be resolved. For example, chronic gastritis might clear up, or spots on the face may fade, or even completely disappear after a few bouts of fever. Without this high heat process, these spots may linger, as they're actually a reflection of internal waste. Some internal blockages or blood stagnation can only be cleared through this high heat. If you reduce the fever too early, this process is interrupted, and the waste can't be fully expelled. That's why I liken a high fever to a phoenix's rebirth through fire. Only after enduring the flames can it be reborn. Or, like Sun Wukong in Journey to the West, who emerged from the alchemical furnace of Laozi with his fire-seeing eyes and indestructible body. So don't be afraid of fever. Instead, we should think about how to build up the body's energy and capacity to have a fever when needed. However, when we determine that a patient is suffering from a serious energy deficiency, we must do everything possible to quickly replenish their energy. This energy replenishment can be divided into two methods, internal and external. For internal replenishment, one can drink a large amount of Jianghan cha. For external support, methods like moxibustion or soaking the feet can be used, but full-body baths should be avoided. Some people may suggest giving a child a bath or hot shower when they have a fever. In mild cases, this might be helpful, but the actual effect is not always ideal. After all, this kind of approach only heats the body externally. During a fever, if you take a bath or shower, it might feel warm at the time, but once the pores open up, wind can easily enter the body. Once wind penetrates, it can travel deeper inside and cause further complications. Therefore, the most important thing is to keep the body warm, not to focus on reducing the fever too quickly. Cooling down the body, reducing the fever, and warming it up are two completely different approaches and have very different effects on the body. Today, we see many teenagers suffering from all kinds of issues, chronic illnesses, or hard-to-treat conditions. In most cases, these problems are the result of improper treatment of common illnesses like colds, fevers, or coughs in the past. What seemed like a simple ailment was often treated incorrectly, leading to deeper, long-term imbalances.